Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Sharks' weekly recap, this time Week 7. The Sharks started this week with the 5th game of their 6-game road trip. They faced off against the Edmonton Oilers, a team that was fielding their new coach, Ken Hitchcock, for the first time this season. The Sharks started off the game pretty well. They got the lead, but then they gave it up. They got another lead, they gave it up. They got a third lead, they gave that one up, and when it came to the overtime, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl combined for what they do best, and the Sharks lost the extra point, and so they dropped to 3-1-1 on the road trip. The Sharks then hosted the Vancouver Canucks in what would be the final game of their longest homestand of the season, and they had a much better game. They were playing against a Canucks team that was on a massive 7-game losing streak coming into this game. The Canucks did not put up much of a fight, and the San Jose Sharks basically rolled over them and finished their homestand with a quite successful 4-1-1 record, getting a possible 9 of 12 points. Their final game of the week came the exact day after, as they faced off against the Golden Knights in Las Vegas, a team that eliminated them from the playoffs last season, a team that the Sharks have, I guess I could say, historically struggled with, but it is technically just last season because Vegas is the newest NHL team, and they continued to have their struggles versus the Vegas Golden Knights as they gave up a very, very early goal just 14 seconds in, and then another one about a couple minutes later, and it eventually snowballed into a 6-0 Vegas Golden Knights victory, the Sharks getting shut out for the 3rd time this season. In terms of offensive goal scores, at the top is Erik Karlsson, as he gets 1 goal, 2 assists to put himself to 3 points on the week, the most, or I guess tied for the most of the week. That puts his total up to 15 points, which is beginning to get to Erik Karlsson's levels where you would expect him to be at this point into the season. Next, Kevin Labanc, as he added 3 assists to his total, putting his assists up to 12 as his points up to 15 as well. Joe Thornton also adding 3 assists as he continues to get back to his known level as he jumps to 8 points. That is, of course, only in 15 games, so relatively solid. Logan Couture, 2 goals for him on the week, no assists, but that puts his point total up to 22, getting near the top of the team, as well as Brent Burns, who has the only other player to get more than a single point this week with his 2 assists, putting his team leading point total up to 24. News of the week, the first one is, of course, Erik Karlsson continues to settle into the team. He had a fantastic week the previous one. He has another strong one this week. All 3 of his points did come in that Vancouver Canucks game. However, even in the Oilers, as well as even some, you could say, in the Golden Knights game, he was actually pretty solid. He didn't make any big mistakes, and as such, Erik Karlsson is definitely beginning to look a lot like the Erik Karlsson the Sharks were expecting when they received him in that big, probably the biggest offseason trade that we've seen in a long time. Next, Joe Thornton is finding his form back, as obviously he struggled a bit coming originally back from injury at the start of the season, as well back from his 9-game injury that he has sustained in this season. Thornton finding a very nice place for himself onto that 3rd line, onto that 2nd power play unit, as he continues to rack up the points and climb up the all-time points ladder. He has recently tied Mario Lemieux for the all-time assists. I believe that is 11th place. Finally, maybe the most interesting piece of news is the goalie controversy that you could say exists right now in San Jose. Is it Aaron Dell or is it Martin Jones? Peter DeBoer makes a very aggressive decision over the weekend as he decided to start Aaron Dell not only against the Canucks in the first half of the back-to-back, but against the Golden Knights in the second half of the back-to-back. And while it didn't work, it does beg the question if DeBoer's confidence of Martin Jones has shaken a little bit after he went back with Jones for the Oilers game after Dell's shutout against the St. Louis Blues, and it didn't particularly work out. I do believe Martin Jones will get the first game of the next week against the Buffalo Sabres, but it'll be interesting to see, as the Sharks have 2 more back-to-backs coming up, whether or not Aaron Dell will outperform Jones, as I would probably wager a bet that these 2 goalies will start one game after the other in each of the back-to-backs, unless DeBoer decides to make another aggressive move and start one of them twice in both back-to-back games. But that will do it for this week's recap. The Sharks have multiple games on the schedule as they continue their 5-game road trip that started in Vegas and will bring them to Buffalo, to Toronto, to Montreal, as well as to Ottawa. Class dismissed.